There is a sin that every woman commits, and almost none of them realize it, a silent psychological error that makes even the most independent women surrender to the type of man who understands the game of perception. Machiavelli would call it the sin of human nature, the irresistible tendency to follow those who seem to dominate one's own inner world. No matter the century, culture, or social class, fascination always belongs to those who understand reality without romanticizing it. Politics guided by reality, not ideals, shows that love isn't blind, it's strategic. The problem is that nobody teaches this. We live in a culture that idolizes vulnerability, but despises quiet power. And that is why many confuse kindness with weakness, presence with submission, and love with dependence. The end justifies the means, said Machiavelli, because the means is the only space where power truly happens, between what is said and what is felt. The seducer who understands this needs no tricks, just awareness. He knows that attraction is not born of appearance, but of contrast, from the cold into the fire, of control in the midst of chaos. That is why the emotionally stable man, the one who has mastered his own inner field, will always seem more dangerous than the predictable man. Because mystery is the oldest disguise of power. And what Machiavelli discovered centuries ago is that power, when properly understood, becomes the most primitive trigger of human surrender. In this video, you'll understand what truly awakens desire, not through words, but through presence. You will discover why self-control is more seductive than charm, and how to transform vulnerability into magnetism. But be careful. What you're about to hear here could change the way you see the attraction game forever. Because the psychological sin that makes any woman surrender isn't in her, it's in you, if you know how to use it. Every empire, no matter how glorious it may seem, is born from what Machiavelli called a policy guided by reality, not by ideals. The dirty method, which so frightens those who pretend to be pure, is nothing more than the art of understanding human nature in its raw form. Some shy away from it as if they avoid looking at their own reflection. But power always belongs to those who are willing to see what others deny. The 6 pillars of this method do not teach perversity, but strategy. They are principles that govern both the conquest of a throne and the conquest of a heart. Machiavelli knew that the end justifies the means when the purpose is great enough. And in this game of emotional power, virtù and fortuna walk hand in hand. The former shapes destiny, the latter tests it. The first pillar is the understanding of true human nature. No king rules subjects he does not understand, just as no man masters his own life if he ignores his motivations. Machiavelli saw human beings as predictable, driven by fear, desire, and vanity. Those who understand this learn the calculated use of force, not brute force, but symbolic force, the silence that creates doubt, the absence that creates value, the word that becomes a decree. The second pillar is the mastery of perception. In love and politics, appearances are more important than reality. The appearance of virtue breeds trust, even when the heart is pure chaos. This is why kings and seducers wear the same cloak, that of controlled theatricality. The third pillar is the strategy of scarcity. What is abundant loses value, be it gold or affection. Machiavelli would say that it is better to be feared than loved when love imposes no limits. Fear here is not tyranny, but presence. It is the silent respect that arises when someone shows they know how to walk away. The fourth pillar is selective loyalty. Loyal armies are not composed of many, but of a trustworthy few. The same is true with emotions. Not every soul deserves access to what you feel. Giving everything is the quickest way to lose control, and control is the fifth pillar. Those who master their emotions manipulate the plot. Those who lose their temper lose their power. The sixth pillar is the most subtle, constant adaptability. Fortune, like luck, changes its face with each dawn. Machiavelli said that the prudent man is one who changes with the times. In relationships, this means reading the field before acting, feeling the rhythm before playing. A strategist who repeats formulas is doomed to fall. One who observes patterns and adapts to the minds of others transforms vulnerability into influence. Ultimately, the dirty method is just a mirror that's too clean. It reveals everything the ego would like to hide, and that's why few can stand it. It doesn't teach manipulation, it teaches perception. But there's a secret hidden between these pillars. Even with the map in hand, most people continue to play the game on the wrong board. Because true power lies not in knowing the rules, but in rewriting the narrative of those who created them. This is where the second pillar of the Machiavellian mind arises: mastery of the story others believe they are living. Machiavelli said that whoever controls the narrative controls destiny, and in the game of attraction, this is even truer. Most people live reacting to the story the other person writes, believing they are improvising, when in fact they are just a character in someone else's script. The person who doesn't dictate the tone of the interaction ends up dancing to a tune they didn't choose. Politics guided by reality, not ideals, shows that there is no such thing as innocent romance. There are unconscious strategies trying to decide who has the power to awaken and who has the power to disappear. The end justifies the means, the old Florentine would say, if the end is to maintain control over what one feels and what one shows. The narrative of attraction isn't about pretending, but about structuring the game so that the other person wants to play by its rules. Taking control of the narrative isn't being manipulative, it's being lucid. The most common mistake is to believe that being kind and available guarantees love, but as Machiavelli would warn, it is better to be feared than loved when love depends on approval. The appearance of virtue has its value as long as you know when to shed it. Sometimes an absence is worth 1,000 words. And "I can't today" commands more power than a whole week of availability. The calculated use of force in this context is knowing how to balance presence and mystery. Those who give themselves completely too soon become predictable, and predictability is the #1 enemy of desire. Imagine a movie. What keeps someone watching isn't the ending, but the tension between what's shown and what's hidden. Attraction follows the same logic. Mystery fuels the imagination, and imagination is the stage where power truly unfolds. When manipulating the narrative, you don't lie, you direct. You give the other enough pieces of the story to create fascination, but never the complete script. Virtue here is the ability to orchestrate emotions with subtlety. Like a strategist moving invisible troops, the skilled seducer moves perceptions. They understand that controlling the pace is more important than controlling the outcome. And for those who think this sounds cold, just remember, Machiavelli never recommended pointless cruelty. He preached prudence. In the politics of affection, prudence is knowing when silence speaks loudest. It's understanding that pause, distance, and even no can be more powerful tools of connection than an immediate yes. What the world calls manipulation, the wise call structure. Because while some strive to be understood, true strategists build contexts where being understood becomes inevitable. The secret lies in dictating the script, not improvising the role you've been given. But every narrative has something beyond control. The biological impulse, the invisible instinct that Machiavelli would call fortune, the unpredictable force that challenges even the coldest strategist. And it is in this territory, where reason loses strength and the body speaks in ancestral codes, that the true art of seduction begins, the one that cannot be explained, only felt. Most believe that seduction is a matter of charm, appearance, or conversation. But Machiavelli would smile at such naivete. He knew, albeit without the modern language of biology, that all human behavior stems from instincts that the ego tries to disguise with morality. Politics, guided by reality, shows that desire is an irrational force, and power, a dance between what the body wants and what the mind justifies. Seduction, at its core, is biology with theatrical direction. It's the unconscious trying to survive, but in a suit and perfume. Therefore, those who try to rationalize too much lose the game before they even begin. The seducer who understands true human nature doesn't fight instinct, he guides it. And when he learns the calculated use of emotional force, he doesn't need to prove anything, just exist at the right rhythm. Every gesture, look, and silence communicates more than words. Attraction arises before logic. In the invisible realm of biological signals, men and women unconsciously seek security and genetic value, but today, genetic value has become synonymous with energy, presence, and self-confidence. The appearance of virtue remains a powerful currency, but not for what it reveals, but for what it conceals. Machiavelli would call this emotional virtue. The ability to appear stable even when internal chaos tries to overflow. The end justifies the means when the means is to master one's own instinct. And this requires understanding the biological game without becoming hostage to it. Because those who are slaves to desire end up desiring to be enslaved. Subconscious seduction operates on the same logic as war. The winner is the one who observes more than acts. Machiavelli said that the prudent prince is not the strongest, but the one most attentive to changes in fortune. The same applies to attraction. The wise man reads the emotional landscape before attacking. A simple example. While many seek attention by speaking loudly, strategists attract by remaining silent. Silence creates space, and space generates curiosity, the most powerful biological trigger of desire. No one can resist for long the mystery that their own brain wants to solve. The secret then is to use other people's instincts to your advantage, without ever appearing to be trying. But there's one detail that differentiates the manipulator from the strategist: intention. The manipulator seeks control out of fear. The strategist seeks awareness out of power. Machiavelli didn't teach how to deceive, but how to govern. And governing one's own impulses is the first step to governing the impulses of others. It's understanding that better to be feared than loved means being respected energetically, not emotionally distant. Fear, when understood as respect, is what maintains the balance between instinct and reason. It's what prevents desire from turning into submission. Seduction, therefore, is more about energetic authority than appearance. And this is where the situation begins to darken, because the more one understands the biology of attraction, the more one realizes how manipulable the human mind is. Then arises the ethical dilemma Machiavelli knew well. To what extent is using the truth morally acceptable? The power to understand another's unconscious is dangerous and irresistible. It's the gateway to what they call dark psychology, where the line between influence and manipulation becomes as thin as the line between light and shadow. Machiavelli never shied away from the shadows. He understood that the light of virtue is only valuable when it illuminates the darkness of human nature. Politics guided by reality, not by ideals, he said, is what separates the naive from the ruler. And the same applies to the psychology of attraction. Those who ignore the dark side of the game end up playing without knowing they're being played. Dark psychology isn't about evil, it's about lucidity. It's the study of the invisible forces that govern human behavior: fear, scarcity, guilt, rejection, pleasure, and power. They are the invisible threads that move the social theater. Pretending they don't exist is like entering a war blindfolded. The end justifies the means, when the means is self-knowledge that prevents you from being manipulated by those who practice it. Most people mistake conscience for perversion. The Machiavellian seducer doesn't destroy, he understands. He realizes that human beings, at their core, seek approval and control, and he uses this strategically. Machiavelli called this virtue the ability to act with precision in the face of fortune, the unpredictable. That's why he said it's better to be feared than loved, when love blinds and fear inspires respect. Dark psychology teaches the same, but in modern language, control your perception and you control the game. It's not about being cruel, but about being lucid enough not to be fooled by emotional narratives. The appearance of virtue remains essential. The world loves the saint, but obeys the strategist. To understand manipulation, one must first understand how it arises. No manipulator dominates others without first being dominated by their own fear. The calculated use of force here is internal. It is the power to contain destructive impulses and direct them toward the right purpose. Machiavelli would say that a true prince manipulates chaos before manipulating the people. The same is true with attraction. The wise man manipulates his own energy before attempting to influence another's. Want an example? The man who tries to instill jealousy demonstrates need. The one who creates mystery demonstrates power. Manipulation, therefore, is not lying. It is knowing how to masterfully manage human emotions. The dark side only becomes dangerous when ego takes over. When virtue turns into vanity and prudence into cruelty, the game loses its nobility. Machiavelli warned, "Avoiding being hated is more important than being loved." The same goes for the psychological game. You can be admired for your coldness, but you should never be hated for your lack of humanity. Ethical manipulation, if it exists, consists of directing perceptions without destroying souls. It is transforming vulnerability into learning, not a weapon. Because the power born of destruction is fragile, that born of conscience is eternal. The manipulator tires, the strategist grows. And yet, there is a tipping point. The tactics no one teaches, the shortcuts that seem too wrong to speak aloud. These are the strategies that break social conventions, the ones that defy apparent morality but follow the real logic of human nature. Machiavelli would call them the secret laws of the court, those known only to bold princes. It is in this gray area, where the morally dubious blends with the psychologically effective, that true power resides. And that is where we will delve next. Every society creates rules to maintain balance, but those who observe closely realize that these same rules actually serve to control those who don't understand the game. Machiavelli always distrusted virtues preached in public. He said that the appearance of virtue is more powerful than the virtue itself. And that's precisely why the dirty method isn't dirty. It's simply a reflection of human nature without makeup. The world teaches you to be kind, understanding, and always available. But in politics, guided by reality, those who give too much of themselves lose power. The end justifies the means when the means is to regain one's own worth. Society preaches altruism but rewards scarcity. It teaches vulnerability but admires those who know how to say no. That's what they don't tell you. What appears to be manipulation is, more often than not, strategy. It's the game of inversion that Machiavelli so admired, giving the impression of yielding while in fact guiding. Social conventions dictate that you should speak your mind, but true strategists choose silence as their weapon. They say, honesty is the best policy, but the Florentine master knew that all truth must be measured, not spilled. To say everything is to hand the map to the enemy. That's why he preferred the calculated use of force, speaking enough to guide, but never enough to expose oneself. Attraction works the same way. Those who reveal everything lose their mystery, and without mystery there is no fascination. The secret is to appear transparent without ever being predictable. These convention-breaking tactics have something in common. They don't seek acceptance, they seek respect. Machiavelli said, "It is better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both." And this is one of the hidden laws of social psychology. Vulnerability without boundaries invites the other to dominate. This is why good people become cynical, because they have confused empathy with submission. Being strategic isn't about being false, it's about being selective. Virtue consists in acting according to the context, not the ideal. Showing less, retreating at the right moment, creating absence. These are tactics that the world condemns, but the unconscious admires. Human nature doesn't respond to morality, it responds to emotion. And that's why these forbidden strategies work. Those who master them understand something most never realize. Power is silent. It's invisible. It's the presence felt even in absence. Machiavelli said that the wise prince must learn to appear compassionate, but act coolly when the throne is at risk. The same is true in the realm of attraction. Those who control their own emotions control the other's rhythm. And curiously, this generates more desire, not less. The world preaches reciprocity, but biology responds to hierarchy. Emotional power is a ladder, and only those who understand the right rung know when to climb or descend. The secret is to keep doubt alive, because mystery maintains value. But these strategies only reach their full potential when they become an art, emotional control. And this is where many fall, because power without self-control becomes self-destruction. The next lesson is perhaps the most dangerous and the most fascinating: how to dominate not only the other, but the very impulse to dominate. How to transform emotion into silent mastery without losing humanity. And this is where the true internal war of the strategist begins. Machiavelli knew that the most solid power is that which doesn't need to be displayed. Emotional control is the invisible fortress of those who govern without shouting. He said that a prudent prince should fear his own passions more than enemy armies. Politics, guided by reality, shows that the most dangerous enemy is within. Fear, ego, the need for acceptance. Whoever masters their own emotional domain dominates all others. In seduction, this is even more evident. Absence becomes a tool, silence becomes language, and calm becomes provocation. The end justifies the means when the means is to preserve one's own center while the other tries to destabilize you. In the game of power, those who react lose, and those who observe win. Emotional power is a dance between presence and withdrawal. The most common mistake is to believe that being always available creates connection. In fact, too much presence destroys value. Machiavelli would say that it is better to be feared than loved if love means dependence. Respect is born from uncertainty. A simple example: a leader who never changes inspires more confidence than one who needs to justify himself. The same is true of attraction. A man who reacts to every provocation shows emotional vulnerability. One who remains calm creates curiosity. This serenity is not coldness, it is strategy. It is the calculated use of inner strength, the ability to restrain the impulse to prove, to please, to explain. Every relationship is an energy field, and whoever sets the emotional pace dictates the narrative. The appearance of virtue here is essential. It's the calm that seems natural, but is trained. The Machiavellian prince practices self-control as one trains the body for war, because he knows that the hardest battle is not against the other, but against one's own need for control. The paradox is that, by relinquishing the need to dominate, the strategist gains true mastery. What appears to be surrender is merely a more subtle form of command. Those who learn to listen to the inner silence notice the other's micro-reactions, the look that flees, the quickening of the breath, the gesture that betrays fear. And there, in the details, power is born. But emotional control isn't just a weapon. It's also a shield. It protects against manipulation. Machiavelli warned that a foolish ruler allows himself to be led astray by flattery. In love, flattery comes disguised as affection. It's the need to please that gives away the throne. Knowing when to walk away is a virtue few master. Constant adaptability allows you to move between tenderness and coldness without losing authenticity. This fluidity is disconcerting because it reveals that you don't depend on others to exist. True power isn't controlling others, but remaining whole when they try to fragment you. And when this level of inner mastery is achieved, something curious happens. Weaknesses begin to change form. What once seemed like fragility becomes a tool. Vulnerability, when understood, transforms into magnetism. And this is where the game changes completely, because what once held you hostage now makes you a leader. It's the point where fear transforms into fascination, pain into power, and failure into learning. Machiavelli would call this the miracle of adaptation, when the strategist uses their own scars as armor. This is the next secret. Machiavelli never believed in absolute weakness. For him, every mistake, fear, or pain could become an instrument of power as long as it was used consciously. Fortune favors the bold, he said. But boldness here is not the absence of fear, but mastery over it. Politics guided by reality shows that the most dangerous human being is the one who has made peace with their own vulnerability. The world teaches that being strong means hiding pain. Machiavelli would teach the opposite. Being strong means using it as fuel. Because those who have nothing to hide cannot be blackmailed, and those who have no need to prove themselves cannot be manipulated. Virtue consists in transforming wounds into levers. The end justifies the means when the means is to evolve through what has hurt you. Vulnerability, when understood, generates magnetism. It creates contrast, and contrast is the essence of attraction. No one is attracted to perfection, but rather to the hidden humanity in someone who seems untouchable. Machiavelli would say that a prince must appear human, but never vulnerable to the point of losing respect. This subtlety is art. The calculated use of emotional force is to show just enough of your pain to generate connection without ever allowing it to become weakness. It's like opening a chink in armor, enough for the other to see the blood, but not enough to hurt. This measured exposure creates mystery, and mystery breeds power. This is how vulnerability ceases to be a wound and becomes a tool. Transforming pain into strength is an act of inner engineering. It requires self-awareness and the courage to see what others avoid. Machiavelli would say that governing a city is easy. Governing one's own mind is difficult. True human nature is made of contradictions, ego and guilt, pride and fear, love and self-preservation. Those who understand this become flexible, adaptable, and unbreakable. Constant adaptability is what transforms trauma into wisdom. Every rejection, every loss, every failure can become a lesson in emotional power. The strategist observes pain and asks, "How can I use this?" It's the opposite of victimhood. It's psychological alchemy. It's shadow work disguised as internal politics. But there's one detail Machiavelli would have loved. Vulnerability doesn't just generate power, it humanizes it. The cold leader inspires distance. The leader who exposes his humanity inspires loyalty. Loyal armies of their own form when people sense truth. The same happens with attraction. When someone shows themselves to be human without demeaning themselves, they create a sacred tension between strength and tenderness. The unconscious reads this as authenticity, and authenticity is irresistible, virtue at this point becomes charisma. Because the power born of healed pain is magnetic, silent, and indisputable. It doesn't need to convince, just exist. It's the kind of energy that attracts without promises. And it is at this stage that the dirty method reveals itself as something far more noble than it initially seemed. It's not about manipulation, but about mastery. It's not about dominating the other, but about mastering one's own reflection. Vulnerability is the ultimate test of fortune. It separates the ego that seeks victory from the soul that seeks understanding. And those who pass through this crucible emerge with a new form of power, one that Machiavelli could never write about, but lived in silence. The power to be unshakable because it has already been broken. And it is here that the cycle closes, not with victory over the world, but with victory over oneself. So now you know. The game has never been about who pleases more, but about who understands the human mind more lucidly. Machiavelli once said, "The prudent man shapes destiny according to the wind of fortune." And in this case, the wind blows for those who control their emotions. You don't have to be the prettiest, the richest, or the most interesting. It needs to be the most stable one, the one that doesn't shake when the other tries to test its limits. Think about how many times you have devalued yourself out of fear of losing someone. How many times have you confused connection with dependence? How many times was it predictable when it should have been a mystery? Reality-driven politics shows that power lies at the center, between the heat of emotion and the ice of strategy. And those who inhabit this balance never beg for attention, they attract it. True seduction is self-awareness. It's when you master your own script to the point where you don't need to act. It is Machiavellian virtue applied to the soul, the ability to adapt without losing essence, to show power without needing to make noise. Because when you master yourself, the world bends without you noticing, and love, or what they call love, becomes a consequence, not an objective. Now I ask you, how many times have you been manipulated because you didn't know the game? How many times have you confused kindness with weakness? And how long will you let others write the narrative of your life? If the answer bothered you, great. It is the sign that change has begun. If something awakened in you, write in the comments. I want to know what you saw of yourself in this mirror. And if you want to continue learning to master the game of mind, emotion, and power, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and get ready. Because the next video will show you how emotional control is the purest form of power there is.